My name is Nathaniel Hayes, but people usually call me Nate. I'm 32 years old, and until very recently, I might have been the most invisible man in my own family. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, to a family that believed in hierarchy. My parents adored my older brother, Austin, who became a surgeon, and my younger sister, Clara, who made a career in law. Somewhere in between those golden children was me, a quiet middle child who dropped out of college after one semester to try new ventures. That phrase became a family joke. At holiday dinners, my brother's triumphs and my sister's milestones filled every corner of conversation. My attempts to talk about the app one was sketching, the nonprofit work I'd done on weekends, or even the part-time jobs I juggled were brushed aside politely, or sometimes, not even politely. Before we jump into today's story, drop a quick comment to say hi, tell me your name, where you're watching from, and let me know if you're sticking around till the end. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Alright, let's get into the story. But I stayed quiet through it all. I told myself I didn't need their validation. Still, birthdays are different. Birthdays are the one day you expect your family to look at you, to say to the world, "We see you, and you matter." On September 25th, 2024, my birthday, nobody remembered. Not a call, not a text, not even a half-hearted Facebook message. I walked into my parents' house that evening, clutching a store-bought cake like some sort of pathetic offering, only to find them celebrating Austin's medical journal publication. The dining room was filled with laughter and toasts, and when I stood quietly at the door, cake in hand, my mother looked at me and said, "Oh, Nate, I didn't know you were coming over. We're a bit busy right now." I mumbled something, left the cake on the counter, and walked out before anyone noticed the number candles I had stuck into the frosting, a crooked 32. It rained that night. I remember driving through downtown Denver, headlights blurred on the wet windshield, the local radio station muttering in the background. I felt hollow, something between anger and despair. That hollow space had been building for years, but that night, my day, it broke completely. And yet, as fate would have it, the very next evening, my family's eyes would be glued to the television, jaws dropped, faces pale, watching me, yes, me, the invisible middle child, standing at a podium with the mayor of Denver, shaking hands as the headline scrolled beneath my face. Local tech innovator donates $1 billion to community development. How did this happen? How did I become the man who changed overnight from forgotten brother to billionaire philanthropist splashed across every news channel? To answer that, I have to tell you the story of everything that led to that one extraordinary night. A billionaire doesn't appear out of nowhere, not really. For me, it started 8 years earlier, when I was 24 and broke, washing dishes in a Mexican restaurant off Colfax Avenue. I used to scribble in a notebook during my free moments, sketches of user interfaces, half-baked business ideas, and dreams too fragile to share with anyone. At the time, I was obsessed with one question. Why is generosity so hard to measure? I'd seen plenty of GoFundMe campaigns and donation boxes, but I always wondered whether people truly knew where their money went, and whether transparency might inspire more kindness. I sketched out the idea for an app that tracked charitable donations with blockchain technology, giving users a clear chain of accountability and even small personal rewards. I called it Charity Chain. For years, I built it quietly, coding in borrowed Wi-Fi cafes, scraping together money for hosting servers, and cold emailing potential investors who mostly ignored me. Meanwhile, my family never asked what I was working on. To them, I was between jobs or still figuring life out. What they didn't know was that by 2021, a Silicon Valley incubator had noticed my pitch deck. I got seed funding, then Series A. By 2023, the app was handling millions of dollars in donations from corporate partners and individual donors alike. By 2024, just days before my birthday, a hedge fund had finalized a massive acquisition, buying majority control of Charity Chain for $1.6 billion. I remember sitting at my lawyer's office downtown, signing the final documents, feeling strangely numb. When wealth comes crashing through the door after years of scarcity, you'd think it would feel like a miracle. To me, it just felt lonely. Which is why I decided I didn't want to hoard it. Not like the entrepreneurs you read about who vanish behind their mansions and yachts. I wanted to give it away, and not in a quiet way this time. I wanted the world, especially my city, to know that generosity could echo louder than greed. The problem was, none of this happened on my birthday. On my birthday, all I knew was that my family had ignored me. I didn't tell them about the sale. I didn't tell them about the billions sitting in my account. I just drove home from that humiliating night at the house, rain streaking across my windshield, with a lump in my throat. The announcement event was scheduled for the 26th, the very next day. They had no idea what was coming. The ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton buzzed with voices that next evening. Local leaders, nonprofit directors, reporters, all dressed in formal wear, leaned toward the stage, waiting. I remember tugging at my tie nervously, the weight of cameras pointed at me. The mayor stood beside me, smiling wide as he told the crowd about Denver's future, new schools, community centers, healthcare clinics and low-income neighborhoods. He praised the visionary generosity of a man named Nathaniel Hayes. It still felt surreal, like watching another person's life unfold. When I stepped to the podium, the lights nearly blinded me. I cleared my throat. My name is Nathaniel Hayes, I began, voice trembling but steadying with each word, and yesterday, the people who know me best barely noticed it was my birthday. And honestly, that stung. But tonight, I realize the city I love needs more recognition than I ever did. So I am pledging $1 billion toward rebuilding communities, education initiatives, and supporting grassroots organizations. Gasps spread through the room. Cameras flashed like lightning. For a split second, as the words hung in the air, I thought about my mother's politely dismissive voice when I had walked in with that cake. I thought about the laughter at my brother's toast, and my sister's applause for him. And then I looked outward, at the hundreds of strangers now clapping for me, some with tears in their eyes. It was the loudest birthday gift I'd ever received, one day too late. Meanwhile, back at my parents' house, they were eating leftovers from the previous night's celebration, the TV humming idly in the background. Clara was flipping through her phone, Austin debating some medical journal statistics with my father, when suddenly the anchor's voice sharpened. Breaking news tonight, Denver local entrepreneur Nathaniel Hayes has announced a charitable donation of $1 billion toward community development. They froze, heads turning toward the television. And there I was. Their overlooked son. Their afterthought. Standing at a podium, clear as day, shaking hands with the mayor. My mother nearly dropped her wine glass. My father leaned forward, muttering, that's our Nate. Clara whispered softly, he never said a word. They watched as the footage replayed of me declaring the pledge. They watched the reporters analyzing how one man's generosity might reshape the city. And as they sat in stunned silence, the truth became unavoidable. The son they had ignored on his birthday was the man the entire city now celebrated. I turned my phone on the morning after the announcement to find it buzzing nonstop. Messages, voicemails, social media notifications. But in between the congratulations from journalists, nonprofits, and venture contacts, I noticed the familiar names. Call me. Mom. Wow. Nate. Can we talk? Clara. Hey bro, impressive. Catch up soon? Austin. It would have been funny if it hadn't cut so deep. Just 48 hours earlier, they hadn't thought I was worth a single text on my birthday. Now, suddenly, I was their prodigy. I ignored the calls at first. I threw myself into meetings with nonprofit leaders, trying to organize deployment of the funds. But everywhere I went, microphones followed me. Mr. Hayes, how do you plan to allocate the billion? Mr. Hayes, are you the next Bill Gates of Denver? Mr. Hayes, what do you want your legacy to be? Truthfully, I wanted none of the titles. I just wanted lives to change. But late that evening, when the cheering crowds had begun to quiet and I was alone in my high-rise apartment overlooking the city, my phone buzzed again. Mom calling. I stared at the screen until it nearly went black. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Sweetheart, she said almost breathlessly, why didn't you tell us? I bit down hard on my lip. Would you have listened? Silence on the line. She tried again. Nathaniel, we're proud of you. Truly. Your father and I, well, we were just stunned. Why would you hide something so important from your family? A flare of anger rose in me. Because every time I tried to tell you what I was working on, you brushed me off. Because last night, on my birthday, you didn't even remember I exist. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, Nate. That was wrong of us. There was so much happening. Yeah, I said coldly. There's always so much happening. Unless it's Austin's surgery victories or Clara's law firm promotions, suddenly the world stops. But me? I could be holding $1 billion idea in my head, and you'd never notice. I ended the call before she could respond. My chest tightened, but some part of me knew that finally, they heard the truth. 3 days later, an envelope appeared at my office. It was hand-delivered, addressed in my father's neat handwriting. Inside was a card. We'd love to have you over for dinner, Saturday. Just family. Please come. Mom and Dad. I stared at it for a good while. Every instinct told me not to go. Yet curiosity gnawed at me. Did they really want to reconcile, or were they looking to bask in my newfound fame? Saturday evening, I drove through the familiar suburban neighborhood. The same houses with their neatly trimmed lawns, the same front porch light glowing against twilight. I had once felt invisible crossing that threshold. Tonight, I wondered if I'd feel like a stranger. When the door opened, my father stood there with an uncertain smile. Nathaniel, he said, his voice a little stiff. It's good to see you, son. Inside, the table was set for 5. Austin and Clara looked awkward, shifting in their seats. My mother hurried over and hugged me, something she hadn't done in years. Happy belated birthday, sweetheart, she whispered. There was a cake on the counter, clearly bought from the same grocery store chain I'd gone to days earlier. This one read, "We're proud of you, Nate." For a second, I almost laughed out loud. We sat down to dinner, passing around roasted chicken and green beans. But beneath the small talk hung an unspoken tension. Finally, Clara cleared her throat. Nate, I just want to say, what you did was incredible. Really. I think we all underestimated you, and I'm sorry for that. Austin nodded reluctantly. Yeah. You've done something none of us ever could. It's impressive. I pushed food around my plate. Why now? Why only after the cameras showed up? The room went heavy. My father sighed. Son, sometimes, we don't see what's right in front of us. That doesn't excuse it. But perhaps this is a chance to start over. I wanted to believe him. Truly. But the bitter taste of that birthday night still clung to me. In the following weeks, my family kept reaching out. Calls, texts, invitations. My mother dropped by my office unannounced with homemade muffins, as though baked goods could erase years of dismissal. But I didn't push them away entirely. Instead, I set a test. One quiet Sunday afternoon, I invited them all to join me at a new community center that the charity chain fund was building in one of Denver's poorest neighborhoods. It was an old abandoned warehouse I had purchased, with plans to transform it into a library, healthcare clinic, and free tutoring hub. When my family arrived, they hesitated at the peeling paint, the graffiti, the uneven pavement. Clara clutched her purse. Austin looked restless, as though his scrubs were calling him back to the sanitized halls of the hospital. But I led them inside anyway. "Look," I said, gesturing to where construction crews were already drawing chalk lines on the floor. "This is where kids will read, where families will get healthcare without worrying about a bill. This is what I want my life to be about." My father frowned slightly. "It's noble, Nate, but is this really where your $1 billion should go? Infrastructure, healthcare, schools, these are government responsibilities. Shouldn't you be focusing on safer investments, maybe growing your fortune?" I stared at him, stunned. This is the investment. Investing in people. In children. In futures that your government doesn't care enough to fix. My father's doubt stung, but what hurt more was Austin muttering, "Seems risky. All it takes is poor management and all that money vanishes." In that moment, I realized something chilling. Even staring the impact in the face, my family wasn't moved by the purpose. They were moved by the fortune. It was later that week, during a late-night community meeting at the warehouse, that I found a sense of belonging I had never felt at my parents' table. Dozens of local families gathered, single mothers, immigrants, elderly couples. They came with ideas, hopes, questions. I handed the microphone not to politicians or CEOs, but to community members. An 8-year-old boy suggested a basketball court. A grandmother asked for an on-site nurse who spoke Spanish. The crowd applauded, and I stood there, listening, realizing that this, strangers becoming partners, was the family I hadn't known I'd been searching for all along. As applause filled the warehouse, I glanced at the doorway. My mother was standing there, watching quietly. She'd come on her own, without telling the others. Our eyes met. When the crowd dispersed, she approached me slowly. "You belong here, don't you?" she said softly. Not accusatory, not dismissive. For the first time in my adult life, her words felt like observation rather than judgment. "Yes," I said simply. Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm sorry for the years we didn't see you. Truly sorry." I wanted to believe her. But forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a road you walk. And I wasn't sure if she was ready for the walk. Within 2 months, charity chain's $1 billion pledge had become national news. CNN, NBC, even international outlets were calling me the face of modern philanthropy. Politicians quoted me. Tech blogs dissected me. Strangers sent me letters calling me their hero. And yet, in the quiet hours of the night, I sometimes lay awake wondering, why did it take $1 billion for my family to say they were proud? What is it about money that makes people suddenly see you as worthy? The irony wasn't lost on me. The very thing I had tried to build, a system encouraging generosity without greed, had made me wealthy beyond imagination. And instead of bridging the distance with my family, it seemed only to highlight it. That tension was only beginning. Success in America is never just about what you do, it's about who gets to tell the story first. After my $1 billion pledge, the media went into overdrive. Some outlets painted me as a visionary philanthropist. Others dug into my past, framing me as the underdog son ignored by his family. Headlines like "Black Sheep Billionaire Sends Shockwaves Through Denver" stacked across newsstands. Every reporter wanted the family angle. I dodged those questions at first. But one night, at a CNN interview, the host pressed harder. "Mr. Hayes, your family has been noticeably absent during your rise. Rumor has it they only recently reached out once you made headlines. How do you respond to those who say even your own household didn't believe in you? I smiled tightly, though inside I clenched my fists. What matters isn't who believed in me yesterday, I said carefully. What matters is what I do today, and tomorrow, for the people who need me most. Family isn't always the people who share your name. Sometimes, it's the people who share your struggle. It was a neat answer. But behind it, my phone buzzed angrily afterward with my father's text. You didn't have to embarrass us on national television. The weeks that followed only deepened the divide. Austin began reaching out with proposals. Bro, we could start a state-of-the-art surgical wing with your name on it. Imagine the Hayes Family Medical Center. Legacy stuff, man. Clara wasn't far behind. Nathaniel, I could advise you legally for future projects. My firm could handle all your contracts. It only makes sense to keep things in the family. Even my father suggested investment opportunities, sensible real estate, oil ventures, portfolios that would multiply that fortune tenfold. At first, I entertained the conversations out of politeness. But then I realized something chilling. None of them had once asked me how I was doing. Not one asked if I was happy, or if I felt the weight of what I'd taken on. Every suggestion was about money, where it could go, how it could benefit them. It felt less like family, and more like a boardroom circling an asset. One rainy night, unable to sleep, I dug out an old box from the top of my closet. Inside were journals from my youth. In one, dated when I was 12, I'd scribbled. Today, Mom said Austin's brain is going to save lives, and Clara's voice will change laws. She looked at me and said, and you, well, you'll figure out something. Even in my childhood handwriting, the words slanted downward, as though they'd carried the weight of resignation. I shut the journal, tears stinging my eyes. Money hadn't erased that feeling. Billionaire or not, part of me was still that 12-year-old boy, desperate for recognition. The breaking point came during a charity gala in Dallas. I had been invited to speak about transparency and philanthropy. Midway through dinner, I spotted my family at a table near the front. I hadn't known they were coming. After the speech, instead of applause and polite smiles, Austin stood up and clinked his glass. Let's not forget, he said loudly, that it's not just Nathaniel who carries the Hayes bloodline. It's a family legacy of hard work that runs through all of us. The crowd chuckled awkwardly. I felt heat burn my face. He was trying to tether my achievement back to the family, as though my billion-dollar impact had sprouted from their approval. Then my father added, indeed. Nate's gift is remarkable. But it shows what a Hayes can accomplish, and we hope to continue expanding that legacy. That word again, legacy. Only now that it looked golden were they eager to claim me. When the gala ended, I confronted them outside the hotel. The Dallas night was humid, city lights flickering in puddles along the curb. Why are you here? I demanded. My father replied smoothly, because whether you admit it or not, we are part of your story. I laughed bitterly. Where were you when I was broke and sleeping in my car? Where were you when I showed up with that cake on my 32nd birthday? Do you want to be part of my story or my fortune? Their silence was answer enough. Back in Denver, I poured myself into projects. Libraries, scholarships, clinics. Every ribbon cutting felt like breathing air too crisp for my family to inhale. But the pressures didn't stop. Journalists began digging deeper. They found out about the discord within my household, speculating publicly that we were fractured. Headlines screamed, "The Hayes Rift, Billionaire's Charity versus Family Ambitions." My mother called weeping. Please, Nate. Please stop letting the world see us as broken. We're still a family. But that was the question, wasn't it? Were we? One sleepless dawn, I stood at the rooftop of my apartment and looked out at the Denver skyline. The city was waking up, lights flicking on one by one. I knew then that my family, the biological one, had never truly seen me until wealth dragged me into their view. They didn't see the boy who scribbled code by night. They didn't see the man who wanted nothing more than a shared slice of cake on his birthday. All they saw now was the fortune. And I couldn't let that fortune rewrite the truth. I drafted a long letter one night. Dear Mom and Dad, I need you to understand one thing: money didn't make me who I am. What you see now is the same boy you lived away from for decades. If I lost every dollar tomorrow, I'd still be him. If you only love me for the numbers in my bank account, then I don't want that love. Because it isn't love. Love is remembering someone on their birthday, no matter how small their cake is. Love is listening when they speak, even if their words don't shine yet. Maybe someday I'll send this to you. Maybe not. For now, it's enough that I finally said it, even if the page is the only one listening. I folded the letter back into its envelope and stored it in the same journal box. Some truths weren't ready for their ears. Not yet. Exactly 1 year later, on September 25th, 2025, I stood in that same warehouse, now fully transformed. The library shelves were stacked. Children were playing basketball in the shiny new gym. Families were laughing together in the courtyard. Someone brought out a cake. And when they lit 33 candles for me, hundreds of voices sang happy birthday: neighbors, kids, volunteers, strangers who had become kin. As the candles flickered, I closed my eyes. The words of that 12-year-old boy in the journal echoed faintly. But they were drowned out by something louder now, the sound of authentic belonging. And for the first time, I realized the family I had always craved didn't have to share my blood. They shared my heart. When I blew out those candles, I didn't wish for recognition. I wished only that I'd never lower myself again to beg for it. Even as the community embraced me, the rift with my family deepened in quieter, more troubling ways. I'd stopped taking their calls regularly, but every so often something slipped through. Austin gave an interview at his hospital, casually saying, "Generosity runs in our family." I'm not surprised Nate did what he did. We've all been raised to give back. My jaw clenched when I saw the clip. I wanted to scream that nothing about the way they treated me had ever shown generosity. But I stayed silent. Clara, meanwhile, began posting online about her inspiration from my work. It was clear to me that she wanted to wrap her own rising profile in my story. Each headline, each soundbite, pulled at me like a thorn. They were bending the narrative, inserting themselves into something they'd had no hand in building. And yet, beneath all my resentment, I still caught myself aching for their love. That was the cruelest truth of all. It came to a climax in spring of 2026, when my father requested a meeting. He suggested we meet at his law firm's boardroom, a sterile place with oak-paneled walls and polished glass tables. When I walked in, I noticed not just my parents, brother, and sister, but two men in suits I didn't recognize. Business partners, my father said calmly, as though I should have expected it. The conversation quickly spiraled. They pitched me on establishing a Hayes family foundation, with my billion woven into a larger endowment. Pictures of us smiling together, names carved on hospitals, speeches about family legacy. I listened for 10 minutes before I put my hands flat on the table. "No," I said firmly. My father's face stiffened. "Nathaniel, don't be rash. This is about ensuring your name, our name, has longevity. My name doesn't need your foundation. And if you think I'll give up control of funds meant for families in need just so you can polish a brand, you've forgotten exactly who I am." Austin jumped in, frustrated. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Do you realize what we could accomplish together?" I snapped, my voice sharp. Together? Where was this togetherness when I was chasing this dream alone? Where was it when I begged for someone to listen? The room fell silent. Finally, I pushed my chair back and stood. Do what you want. But my money, my mission, my name, they're not pawns in your game. And with that, I walked out, for the first time certain that blood didn't guarantee loyalty. Perhaps it was inevitable, but just weeks later, the media finally latched onto the family conflict. A Denver Post expose ran with the headline, Hayes Divide, Philanthropist Blocks Family Foundation Plan. It painted me as stubborn, unwilling to collaborate with my own kin. Reporters dug deeper, citing anonymous sources close to the family who claimed I was isolating myself. I had no doubt those leaks came from within my household. The calls poured in. Do you want to clarify? Do you want to deny? I refused interviews at first. But then I realized, if I let them set the narrative, I'd be cornered again. So one evening, in a crowded community gym I had helped build, I faced the cameras. Kids played in the background. Mothers sat in folding chairs, watching. I didn't build charity chain for legacy branding or vanity projects, I said steadily. I built it because I know what it feels like to be invisible. If my own blood couldn't see me, how many more people in the city live unseen every day? That's who this money is for. No headlines, no marble plaques. Just lives changed. The clip went viral. My inbox filled with messages from strangers who said they finally understood what I meant by family isn't always blood. But at home, it sparked an icy silence. For weeks, none of them reached out. It was late autumn when my mother appeared again. She came not with muffins or apologies rehearsed, but with something far smaller, an old photograph. It showed me as a boy of 7, sitting at the kitchen table with a toy computer set, grinning ear to ear. I found this, she said softly at my office door. You always had that look in your eyes, like you saw a different world than we did. Her words caught me off guard. And yet you never believed in me. Tears shimmered on her lashes. I didn't understand you. That doesn't excuse it. But I see you now, Nathaniel. Truly. And I wish I'd seen you sooner. I wanted to harden, to push her away. But something in her voice broke through. Genuine regret, not tied to money, not tied to image. For the first time in years, I let her hug me without resistance. It didn't erase the past. But it was a start. By 2027, the Denver projects had flourished. The once abandoned warehouse became a beacon in the city. Children who had only known cracked sidewalks now read in bright classrooms. Families who once feared medical bills now stood in line for free clinics. I was invited to universities, boardrooms, even Capitol Hill to speak on philanthropy. But every time, I returned home to Denver to remind myself who I was doing this for. And slowly, I realized what legacy truly meant. Not the name etched in gold. Not the endless praise. Legacy was the quiet ripple, the child growing up safer because a stranger cared, the grandmother smiling because her prescription didn't bankrupt her. Legacy wasn't something my family could brand. It wasn't theirs to own. It was mine to live and, more importantly, mine to give away. The following year, on my 34th birthday, I invited my parents, Austin, and Clara to the community center for the first time since it had opened. I expected skepticism, judgmental stares. Instead, when they arrived, I saw something else. My sister watched children reading with volunteers and whispered, "They're actually changing, aren't they?" Austin examined the clinic, brows furrowed. These doctors, they're saving lives. Without billing systems. It's efficient. My father didn't say much. But I noticed he quietly folded his arms, eyes damp at the sight of children with backpacks emblazoned with charity chain kids. When the cake came out, with happy birthday warbled by dozens of voices, my family sang too. Off-key. Hesitant. But they sang. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped in a bow. But it was participation. And for me, that was enough. Looking back, when strangers ask me how it felt to be ignored into greatness, I always pause before I answer. Because the truth is messy. Yes, their rejection lit a fire in me. Yes, being forgotten broke something in me that I rebuilt with steel. But here's the part the newspapers never print: I would have traded $1 billion just to feel celebrated once as a boy. I would have given away every headline if it meant they had sung to me on my 32nd birthday. Because recognition isn't about wealth. It's about love. Still, maybe that was the paradox I was meant to live, that in being unseen, I learned how to see others. In being forgotten, I was forced to remember those around me. And in the end, that became the greatest wealth of all.